guys, welcome to the Truetone Lounge 2020 Quarantine Edition. This is the way we have to go forward.
The pandemic podcast.
That's right. we're just going to have fun here, and so I'm at home, and Guthrie's at home, and we just wanted to have kind of an update of what Guthrie's been up to, and and how all this time has treated him, and what his thoughts are, and of course we made him pick up a Telecaster, which you got to put a gun to his head to get him to play a telly, but anyway, so one thing I wanted to start off with, which is funny, was on Facebook we were discussing guitar picks, and I just thought it was really funny that.
I never comment that heavily on anything, but the pick thing has been, it's just something that I notice, and something that, I'm not no pun intended, but I'm usually not that picky.
Yeah.
When it comes to certain things, but I have my things that I do like over the years. I mean, and the pick has become something of a topic of conversation, and something that I notice teaching a lot these days. And I've always seen it. It's funny with the Belmont students. I've seen a lot of stuff. We can talk about that if you want, but just little things. I'm not as picky as most people in town about things like neck size and stuff like that. I mean, I've never had really, in my opinion, I don't think I've ever really had that great of guitars. All my friends disagree, but I've never been like a big collector or I've always just kind of played with what with what I have, and I've got some good stuff, but I don't have collections like most of these guys, and I'm not that picky. I mean, if something sounds and plays good, and I feel like I'm not really restricted by the limitations of the instrument, then I'm pretty happy with it,
Yeah, but the funny part is that the pick that I hate the most is one of the picks that you hate the most too, and it's. But, a famous guitar player's kind of signature pick, the Eric Johnson Dunlop little green, and no, it's red. And to me, they're painfully bright, and they're And I don't know how Eric Johnson gets them to work for him, but a lot of people have decided to use them, and they don't work for them.
Yeah, I think since he's got such a unique approach, and his tone is such a signature part of his sound, and probably. Well, not probably. I can almost guarantee you that it's the tone of a guitar is not just the sound; it's also the feel of it. I mean, it's a big part of the feel, and that's why a lot of times guitar players get a bad rap for wanting to turn up and play so loud. And it's not that we just want to be loud. I hate loud guitar, and for the most part, really loud music, and so. It's not that we're trying to be really loud. It's that we're trying to get the amp to a spot that feels good.
Right.
And it's more about the notes jumping out when we attack them, so we're not trying to overplay and overcompensate for the lack of a fast attack. Like, I want a guitar, that's why I love those old arch tops and those old Gibsons for jazz stuff, because when you get that really nice, fat jazz tone, front pickup, warm tone, man, those notes jump out. I mean, you hit a note and it just immediately jumps out. And man, there's nothing better than that, because you're getting an immediate response from hitting the instrument. It's just like a really great acoustic, or any great instrument, I think, is the same. So it's not that guitar players are trying to turn up so loud and be obnoxious. In most cases, I think guys are just trying to get the amp up to a place where it feels good. And so that being said, a lot of guys ask me, they're like, hey man, what's the perfect amp? And for most of us, guys that like me and you and the pros in Nashville, we have a bunch of different amps. But for me, I would probably say, and you would probably agree, a lot of us would probably agree, if guys in town can only have one amp, a lot of us would choose the Deluxe Reverb, because it's portable. It'll hold up in a club. You could even do a live, an outdoor gig with it, and it's not going to completely fall apart on you. And so if you had one amp that has reverb and, kind of the jack of all trades, perfect size for sessions and gigs and whatever, I'd say a Deluxe Reverb. But, it's nice to have about 4 or 5 different amps, because if you go to depending on what size venue you're playing, you can turn each one of those amps up to about 5. I'm talking about the vintage blackface Fenders, which I've, got so used to I can't get away from at this point, even if I tried. But, if you have a super reverb and you go outside, crank it to 5, and you're going to have that good, nice natural compression, that good feel. You take a Princeton reverb to a coffee shop or a real small gig, you're going to be able to crank it up to 4.5 or 5 and get the good tone and the feel and attack you want, but you're not going to be blowing people out of the room. And so the opposite is not true. You can't take a super reverb or a twin to a real small gig and you're going to be blowing people out of the water, and you're going to have a real shitty tone and a real lame attack because your amp is only going to be on 1, right?
Right.
So it's
Agreed.
about, I would have a bunch of different size amps for different gigs, and they're all going to go to the same spot on the volume most of the time because that's where they come alive.
Right.
So with Eric Johnson, I'm assuming that his sound is such a part of his whole legacy and his playing, of course, too. But whatever he's using, whatever he's doing with that pick, he's got such a unique, interesting right hand approach that he's doing something that makes it work for him, clearly, because we all love the way he sounds. And so he's definitely an exception to that Jazz 3 pick rule. So
yeah, and I hope that nobody, no one thought that I was slagging on Eric Johnson in any way, shape, or form. It's, to me, it's an example of finding a piece of gear that your hero uses and it doesn't work for you.
Yeah, it's like Jack Pearson. We all love Jack Pearson. I mean, Jesus, what a monster, amazing freak talent that is from Murfreesboro, Tennessee here. And Jack is like, man, the guy can play blistering electric guitar, slide, amazing, greatest ever, and then pick up an acoustic and play like Django. He can play the mandolin. He can play anything in the world. But he's a guy that uses a pretty heavy pick, like a big, every time I see him, he has a different pick. He likes to change and try these different picks. And a lot of times, like sometimes I've seen him with a Wiegand. Sometimes I've seen him with a, what were we talking about the other day? Gold
blue
tone?
chips.
Blue chip. Gold tone is the banjo or whatever. But the blue chip. And so I've seen him a lot of times use those real big ones, the big, the real big ones. And so he's got a real light touch. I know for a fact Jack has a super, super light touch. And so he's probably letting that pick do a lot of the work for him, And so everybody just attacks their instrument different. And, Bukovac, I got to say, we all talk about Bukovac because he's such a, total badass is the reason why we talk about him so much. But he actually got me on, I must say, Sam Bush got me on the Fender Heavy, and Bukovac got me on the Fender Medium for electric guitar. Now, if I'm playing acoustic, like we talked about in the episode or the Facebook thing, if I'm playing like more of a bluegrass single note mandolin or acoustic larger body guitar, I'm probably going to play like more of a Fender Heavy or that Blue Chip 35 that I think is just awesome. Yeah. There's a few other picks out there that are great, but for the electric, I've found that the medium turned on its shoulder like this is a really good. It's just enough give to where if you're playing funk rhythm or something, you're not getting this real too heavy of a pick attack. There's definitely something to it. But anyway, I don't want to take up the whole conversation talking about that. I got off on a tangent.
It's great. So let's talk about one. What are some things playing wise that you've been working on? Because I mean, you've been, we've all been kind of stuck at home. What are some things on the guitar that you've been working on lately? Like maybe.
Man, I don't really have I don't have much of a practice regimen. I'd like to, I like to pick up the guitar and start trying to find something that sounds like music, like either an interesting chord progression or maybe some melody, or if it's a lick, I'm trying to, like maybe practice like playing over like a 2-5, just a 2-5-1 change, like just interesting stuff that I can work on. I definitely don't practice any scales or metronomic like rhythm stuff or anything, which I should. But mainly, I try to go in a certain direction. Like, if I play a chord, I want to try to take that and then either build some sort of melody or a line from it. Something that I've been doing for a long time, which is an idea that really kind of helped me get out of, like, I'm not necessarily the pentatonic box that everybody's trying to get out of, but it did help that also. But it's the substitution. It's what jazz players do all the time. And what they're doing is they're just, like Danny Gatton said years and years and years ago on that video, he said, you're basically playing in the wrong key. Well, that was his kind of uneducated music theory way of saying, this is how you play jazz. And it really resonated for somebody like me who doesn't know anything about music theory, more now than I ever have, because of just teaching so much and having to explain things that I never had to break down before. But he just basically said, you're playing in the wrong key, which I'll explain right now. And so what he meant by that was, it's basically substituting an idea over another sound. And what a lot of people aren't really understanding with a lot of this stuff, the more I teach, is there's a lot of overthinking going on. And I get that when you're learning, you have to compartmentalize all these different pieces of information that you're getting thrown at, because people are getting overwhelmed. There's a lot going on here. There's rhythm, there's harmony, there's chords, there's scales, there's arpeggios, there's all this stuff. Well, I look at it as it all being the same. If you have a chord, that's your chord is your foundation. That's the first sound that you're being given in a musical situation. Otherwise, we just have this. And so till we commit to a sound, we don't have anything. And so when I play that chord, we go, okay, well, the first thing I'm hearing before I even know what key it is, if I hear somebody play that, I go, oh, that's a minor, because I'm hearing this tone, this darker tone. I'm not hearing the major. I'm not hearing major 7. I'm not hearing dominant 7. I'm hearing the minor. So the first thing that hits you is this foundation of sound. And then I go, well, okay, what are you going to play over that? Well, you can play minor pentatonic over that and be okay. But then as you start adding these other little color notes, like if you add this, well, then if I take minor pentatonic and I play just if I just add the 2 to that pentatonic, just adding the B note here, here, and here, it's not the minor scale, which I think, I have a couple opinions on the minor scale. There's one note in there that I don't think works all the time. And so, but you end up with this. Which just that one note in there, it takes you out of this really stiff box. And it gives you more of this triplet rolling kind of feel with more melody.
Yeah, it has more color to it because adding the 2 or the 9, whatever you want to call it, yeah, it adds a lot more color.
A lot more color, and so then you end up with these lines, It's just more melodic, and so something that simple. And so what was happening with a lot of people is they're not really. They're thinking scales is one thing, chords are another. But I'm trying to really teach that if you see these big foundation chords and then just break those down to where you're seeing the triads and these little partial parts of these chords, and then once you see that really great framework of the chord is the foundation, the arpeggio is the first level of framework, The pentatonic, if you're in a major or minor, is the second level of framework, and then the scale is the third level of framework. It's all sequential, and it's all the same thing once you look at it like that, and you can see it as a whole. And then if you have a triad and you move one note, you move the one down a half step. In every triad, 1, 3, 5, you move the one down a half step, you get major 7. You move the one down a whole step, you get dominant 7. Move the third down a half step, you get minor. So if you learn an arpeggio, and if I learn a major arpeggio, if I want to move it to major 7, I just flat the 1. If I want to go to dominant 7, I flat it again. If I go to minor, I flat the third. So you're not having to learn 4 different things. You're learning one core foundation and just altering that one note over all 4 of these different sounds: major, major 7, dominant 7, minor. If you can get a grasp on how to play over those 4 sounds, you're on your way to being able to navigate your way through the fingerboard a lot more freely than if you really overthink this and try to separate it into all these different things. I think that looking at it like that, because it is so related and it's so close together. But what Danny Gatton meant about playing in other keys, and I know I'm getting way off, but I'm circling back here. Like if I'm playing in A dominant 7, which the dominant 7 chord is tricky because you can't just play major pentatonic or minor pentatonic by themselves over a dominant 7 chord. It doesn't sound right, and that's what everybody's trying to get out of, the trap of that pentatonic, because they know that there's something not quite right there. And what it is a dominant 7 chord. You're getting the major third really strong, but you're also getting that flat 7. That's the rub of that chord that creates that tension that we love so much. And so the way to get hip to that chord is first by playing the arpeggio. Which outlines that chord. Nothing outlines a chord quicker than an arpeggio. Which is I love that way of playing because it does spell out the chords really fast. And so then the Mixolydian, which is the only mode I really know because it is so useful to me, I call it the dominant 7 scale because it's the major scale with the flat 7. So you're getting the major third, you're getting the 1, 3, 5, but you're getting the flat 7. And so what happens is I can play that scale over A dominant 7. If I go to the 4 chord D9 or D7 of any kind, I can play D major with the flat 7 because the note that changes in the chord is the note you have to change with your single note lead guitar playing. So the chords are directly related to any shredding or lead guitar that you want to be able to play. If you don't have a good understanding of these 5 cage system shapes, like if I was going to, I don't ever test anybody on lessons or anything like that, even remotely close to that. But if I did, I always say that I'd say, look, learn your 5 shapes and be able to point to the notes in those chord shapes without even having your hand on the guitar. If you can see them that well, then you're going to have a really great foundation to being able to play over even a 1, 4, 5 in every key. If I take E and I play my 1, 4, 5 here, and then here, or here, or here, you're seeing the relationship. You're not just learning E's everywhere. You're learning E, A, and B in all 5 of those shapes. And then you can really start seeing how these intertwine between the arpeggio, or not the arpeggios, but the triads. And so then if I take E and play E to E7, E7, E to E7, A to A7, E to E7, A to A7, all the way down the neck. Well, what that little exercise enables you to do is see how that flat 7 of the first chord, that tone is pulling our ear to the major third of the next chord.
Right, because it's just semitone away. Yeah.
It's a semitone away. And then if I play A7, it's leading my ear back to E7, or back to E major, sorry, the major third. And then right there, there's E7 again. So if you can see that 7 leading to the third in all those triads, then you're starting to see how you're going to be able to play over chord changes, because if I play this, you can hear that going from E to E7 to A, because I'm outlining, and I'm using a little bit of note leading, of dancing around that major third. As an example, if I'm playing this C-shaped E chord, my notes are here. And a fancy way of getting from here to here is it's like a little Western swing or jazz kind of swing lick. But it's just chromatic. So I couldn't have an understanding of how that lick works if I'm not seeing the foundation of those notes. But anyway, real quick, I'm going to say this, and then I'll get back to a question. But the Danny Gatton thing is this: if you're playing in being so strong in A7, if you take the note that makes that chord what it is, which is G, and I go down a whole step to G major 7. I can play ideas anywhere there's a G and an A dominant 7. I can stem a major 7 arpeggio or idea off of that and resolve back to a major third of A, or even the 1 of A, and it sounds great. And then if I go to A minor, C is the note that makes A minor. I go up a minor third to C major 7, and I play ideas out of that. That's the whole Wes Montgomery trick, where he would go. But really what it is, it's the same, that's all the same thing. If you look at, if A7, if you look at G major 7 over A7, it's the same as it's the same as E minor 7. What a great sound, just that, you know. So all those notes are very relatable. To G. You can just come up with lines from A to G, and it all works over that A7 chord. You go to A minor, ideas out of C major 7. Takes you out of the box, right?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it's funny that turned into this amazing lesson. You have such a kind of a heart for teaching and everything. Your artist works and the Skype lessons that you offer, and just the way that you're kind of in a very simple and easy to understand way that you've kind of described how to approach soloing over changes, and also the approach of making sure that when you're soloing, even without backing, you can tell what the chords are.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important when, you can hear somebody just soloing and you can kind of hear the changes in your head.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you why all this lesson stuff started coming along. For one, I've always gone where the work is. And if an opportunity comes along and I think I can add something to it or it's a good opportunity, I always say yes and then figure it out from there. When I played downtown with Don Kelly, people started asking about country lessons, and a lot of Belmont kids were wanting to learn how to chicken pick. They'd get out of Belmont with those jazz 3-picks and wouldn't know how to play from an A chord to a D chord in a country song. And that's when I started. That's when I started really realizing, like, man, this has nothing to do with, because I was always intimidated by guys that could really play jazz really well, because I never went to school for music, and I grew up playing a lot of roots music. I grew up playing bluegrass, and I didn't play any real country music until I moved to Nashville. But I kind of was already chicken picking because of being such a huge Danny Gatton, and I heard Brent on the Mark O'Connor New Nashville Cats record, and I was hearing guys like Vince and Steve Warner and Ricky Skaggs, and I knew of that kind of playing, Marty Stewart and stuff like that, but I didn't really know anything about being a session musician, which I'm not, but I didn't really know anything about who played on records. And all I knew Jerry Douglas played the dobro on everything. Mark O'Connor played the fiddle on everything. Brent Mason played the guitar. I knew Michael Rhodes' names, and all these guys that are friends of mine now, I knew all their names. Yeah. But I knew guys from like the 90s, because those are the records I listened to. I didn't know anything about becoming a current, musician where you had to keep up with everything. And so everything I've ever been able to do in my life came from a really interesting upbringing with a family that knew what really good music was, and a strong dislike of commercial country music. And so, I can say that now. I love living in Nashville, but I have a strong, avoidance of commercial country music. And a lot of our best friends play on those records, and they're incredible musicians. But, when you see them play a gig that they really enjoy, it's far from the music that's being made on Music Row. It's high level shit. It's like Pat McLaughlin or, all the guys in town that nobody knows about that are really creating music that, like, somebody like me will go listen to a band like that at Douglas Corner or 3rd and Lindsley. It's like a religious experience, right? And so what Nashville's famous for is not necessarily the best thing that's happening here. Until you're in this town and you're embedded in the roots of it, and the guys that are making music that nobody's ever going to hear, that moves you, then the only thing that people know about Nashville is what's on the TV and the radio, which to me is the worst stuff being made here. And I'm not saying the musicians are bad or the songwriters are bad, but the end result that gets, sold is not the thing that we get in our car and listen to when if I ever did do one of those sessions. And I'm saying I'm not good at it, because I'm good at the things that I really enjoy. I'm not good at anything that I don't enjoy. I'm not a good rock and roll guitar player. I mean, there's people out there that would disagree with that, but man, compared to somebody like Bukovac, that's like a encyclopedia of that music, or a gazillion other guitar players here, most of them really, I'm not a rock and roll guitar player. I don't listen to rock and roll music. I don't put on Led Zeppelin and get off on that music. I just don't. I never have.
I'm with you.
And so my playing is not like, I'm not going to plug in an amp at my house and hit a giant chord. I'm going to turn a small amp on and play clean. Like, I can't tell you the last time I turned on an overdrive pedal at my house. But those are just the sounds and the feels and stuff that I like.
Well, I think you've done a great job of finding, your niche and being who you are. And, by teaching, by playing in the styles that work for you, that you enjoy doing. Yeah, again, people should check out the artist works. Of course, from watching this, people can see what a great educator you are, and they should, check out, getting a Skype lesson with you.
Yeah, I love doing it. Yeah. I've made some great friends all around the world by teaching. It's really opened up a lot of doors. I mean, me and Tom were on the phone the other day, and I said, man, have you realized that because I called him, I wanted to just chat about the whole thing that he's doing on the homeschool and stuff, which I just think is so great, that he's got a just amazing presence online now. I mean, it's incredible.
Yes.
It's a great thing on the internet, we all know, and because he's so knowledgeable and so real and so dedicated to it and soulful. But I said, man, have you realized that, you know, if you're coming at music from an honest place and you're truly trying to make some music that you can feel, you know, it doesn't attract a lot of assholes. I mean, most of these guys that come and want to either check out your music or take a lesson or just be your friend or whatever, man, 99.999% of these guys are really great people. You know, I mean, every once in a while, just because we're on the you know, we're in the shark pit of the internet, you know, well, I'll get some guys that I have to delete every once in a while that just want to go right for the, like, man, your lessons suck. I don't know what you're talking about. And I just go, hey, man, what do you want for nothing? Your money back? It's like, go to another YouTube channel and click on somebody else, man. You don't have to be here. They're free, you know?
Yeah.
But, but man, those guys are like 1 out of 5,000, you know?
Right. Yeah.
It's so cool.
So besides, you know, of course, yeah, I've been watching all the homeschooling episodes. So besides Tom's show, what are some other things that, you know, during the quarantine that you've watched or enjoyed, or things that have inspired you?
Well, and I'm not trying to be funny here, but I'll tell you what I've been watching the most of is cooking shows.
Oh.
Because I'm trying to learn how to cook. I mean, this quarantine was a perfect opportunity for me to get off my ass and start learning how to cook more, because I've always been single in Nashville for the most part, you know, and I mean, not married and don't have kids and anything and everything. I'm 41, you know, I'm a lifer musician, but you know, I always ate out. People know me. I love to go out. I'm always at venues. I'm always supporting music. I'm always drinking and having, you know, I love to go out and have a good time with people. And the quarantine was like an immediate opportunity for me to A, take a break from all the nightlife, B, stop eating out every night or 2 times a day at least, you know, lunch and dinner, eating out at a restaurant in Nashville somewhere. And so I'd have people like contacting me all the time going, hey man, I'm coming to Nashville. Can you give me 5 restaurants to check out? Not like, hey, what guitar shops should we go to? They're like, man, we see that you're eating all this great food. Where should we go? So it turned into like that whole thing. And that's a whole other story. But I've been trying to learn how to cook more, and it's been great to stay at home and not be such a slave to like going out. And I've been really, like, when I got back from Africa, I was in Africa for 2.5 weeks, South Africa, with my mom and dad. I went over there to teach a clinic, and it turned into this really incredible trip. Well, that was right when the COVID was starting to really kick in.
Yeah.
And friends were sending me messages like, hey man, you need to come back. It's getting really bad. And me and my mom and dad are sitting over there in this amazing, you know, beautiful South Africa. There wasn't any cases there yet. And we're, you know, we're going, well, we're not going to panic and just jump on a plane and leave right now. And so we waited. We were looking at some information. We're keeping in touch with the travel agent that the guy was working with. And he's like, man, flights are still on. We're good. And so it got up to the last 2 or 3 days that we were supposed to be there. And we ended up coming back 2 days early. So that was we only had to shave 2 days off the trip, but we're glad we got back. We got back at a good time. I mean, if we'd have pushed it any longer, it was starting to get a little stressful.
Yeah.
And, but we had an amazing time. So we got back, and my parents stayed here for a couple of days, and then they drove back down to the Gulf Coast. And here I was now on the 14-day quarantine after traveling through all these airports coming back from South Africa. I mean, we had masks and bandanas and gloves and hand sanitizer and the whole thing, because my mom and dad are in their early 70s, super, super healthy. But, you know, we didn't want to take any chances. And we didn't know anything about this then. I mean, it was all just, you know, going crazy. And so we just, like, you know, we're super vigilant. It was my goal to get me and my parents back here safe. We did. We got back. We're all safe, all healthy. And so I just used that time to put on some records, man. I was like, I shut down. I was like, man, this is awesome. I'm at home by myself. I'm going to put some records on. I'm going to start getting like the mandolin back out. I played along to Bela Fleck Drive for like 3 days and tried to learn a couple of those tunes off there. I started, you know, I love Cuban music, all the, like, you know, if you just put Buena Vista Social Club Radio on Pandora, you can have a party by yourself for like a week, you know?
Right.
And so I love wine. I go to Woodland Wines and do the curbside pickup, and I get, 7 or 8 bottles of wine, and I come home and I might have a friend over on the front porch or something and have a little wine, and then I start kind of winding down around 9:30 or something, and man, I'm in bed by 10 o'clock. I mean, this is like a whole new thing. But playing along to those old records, man, putting that music on and just trying to learn something cool that you love. And the thing about the Cuban music that you don't have to be like a bebop jazz player to figure out is a lot of that stuff is just, it's based on like it's just I say the one minor because that's our tone. We're not, we're in the key of C technically, but that's another thing I wanted to say about the little mini lesson there was if I hear this chord, I'm thinking A minor. I'm not thinking C. I'm not thinking anything else other than the chord that I'm hearing at that moment. And so a lot of guys, a lot of these Belmont students would come over, and this is years and years ago, way before I was making any money teaching or anything. I would charge like, $30, $40 for a guitar lesson, and I didn't even know what I was doing. And these kids would see me at Roberts, and they'd go, "Hey man, we want to learn how to chicken pick. How do you go from an A to a D chord?" And I thought, God, this kid just graduated from Belmont, and he doesn't know how to play from a 1 to a 4 chord.
Yeah.
Because what's happening is they're learning that when you go from one chord to the next chord, they're thinking of that 4 chord as being another chord in another key. And I go, man, you're going to have to stop that right now because A, I don't know what you're talking about. And B, that's the most confusing thing I've ever heard in my life. There's no way my brain will ever work that way. I mean, unless somebody sat me down and really said like, hey man, this is really cool. You need to check this out. Then I might go, like if it was somebody like Pat Burgessson or Jack Pearson, if they sat me down and went, hey man, look, really what they mean by that is this, then I might lighten up on it and go, okay, show me what you're talking about. But man, these kids that come over and are really just already overthinking something that simple, I just go, man, try to simplify this. Think about this. You're in the key of A. When you go to the 4 chord, you're playing over D for a minute. You're outlining the tones that are in the chord that's actually being played. And then you go back to the 1 chord. You're outlining those chord tones for a minute. Then whatever it goes to after that, if it goes to the flat 7 or some weird change, then you're having to play over that chord for a split second. You're not changing keys, you're changing chords. And so it's just I think this might be a little simpler than a lot of people are making it. I think there's a lot of overthinking going on with people that are just learning, But like I said, I get it because you have to compartmentalize certain things to understand it, but before you can get to the level of seeing it, right? So I get it, but I wish there was like a direct link that I could connect from my brain, the way I'm seeing it, to their brain, and it would be like, if we could hook up a USB cable. And and they could see immediately how I'm seeing this and how simple it is for me to just see that that's A and that's going to the 4. I mean, you're playing over the chord changes, but you're staying right in that shape. But you have to be able to see those chord shapes and the information around those to I think that's a really good, that's a good foundation,
You have to know the neck of the guitar. You have to know the notes. There's no way around it.
At least a little bit. Now one thing I hate to keep bringing up Tom, but one thing that surprised me about, well, it didn't surprise me, but one thing that kind of made me think for a minute was he was saying what he thought was extremely, extremely important. Like as important as I will say that the chord shapes are, he was saying knowing every single note on the fingerboard cold.
Yeah.
Which I can tell you, I don't know that. If you pointed to that note right there or this note right there, it would take me a minute to figure out what it was.
Yeah.
I don't know them like he does, or like Jack probably does, or Pat, where they know the notes. It's just because I've never focused on any theory. like I know what key I'm in, and I know that I know that that's E and F sharp and G and A flat and A and B flat and B and C and all that. I know that, but as far as just randomly knowing every single note cold on the fingerboard, that would take me a while to get that going. It's just something I never learned, but
Yeah. So you talked about listening to some old records. Name 3 to 5, records that are, that really you played a lot over the last couple of weeks that just really kind of floor you.
Okay, there's a Van Morrison record called Poetic Champions Compose.
Okay.
The critics hated it, but I think it's one of his greatest records. I listen to that record nonstop. From start to finish, I listen to that record. I think it's killer. A lot of times I'll go to sleep listening to it. And then I listen to Dire Straits, Brothers in Arms, or one of the first or second records of theirs. Really, I can say any Dire Straits. I also like On Every Street. So Brothers in Arms and On Every Street are my 2 go-to Dire Straits records, although the early stuff is also killer. And then any Cuban music, I'll put on. What I like with the Cuban stuff is I'll put on just like a Pandora station. I've been getting back into Pandora because it's so random. I like the random fact. Spotify is great if you have a playlist, and I like to kind of go from one thing to the next. But if I do Cuban stuff, I'll go to Pandora and I'll either put on like Afro-Cuban All-Stars, or I'll put on Buena Vista Social Club, which is a lot of people's go-to Cuban stuff. That'll take you down a great rabbit hole of some killer Cuban stuff. The bluegrass is like Bela Fleck Drive. Some of that stuff, I love. And let's see what else. And then sometimes I'll do the Spotify, the daily mix. So, I've got there's a daily mix for like R&B and soul, Bill Withers and all that stuff. And then there's another one that's like Muddy Waters and, old blues. And then there's another one that's like also the Cuban stuff. So I'll go to those. I just like kind of random stuff. I want to be, if I'm cooking or something, I'll put on that and just let all the songs play. And I'm entertained by that,
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, Guthrie, we ought to, shut her down. I really appreciate you, being willing to do this. This was a real treat, and you gave us a whole lesson, and we got to get a good, nice update from you, and what a treat. So thank you so much, Guthrie.
You didn't even ask any questions. I've talked the whole time, man. I'm so sorry.
No, this is perfect. I didn't have to prod you at all.
I just got on a roll, but I could go on for hours. I love talking about this stuff, and I'm lucky that I don't have the knowledge and of the history of music and records like a lot of guys in town do, but I've developed at least enough experience on some of this stuff to where I can share a little bit of knowledge that I think might work for people, and I'm happy to share it. And like I said, man, I'm making a lot of great new friends around the world by being on the internet and teaching a little bit. And so it's fun, man. It's fun, and it's a great way to kind of give back a little bit during a crazy time that we're all, man, I was okay the first month, and now I'm starting to get a little bit stir crazy. I'm wanting to, it's like nobody really has any real answers that we can trust or believe. And I feel like everybody's kind of just flying blind, and we don't know when this stuff's going to end, or is it safe or is it not? And I'm just kind of over the stress of it,
Yeah, I think everyone is.
Yeah, I think we all are at this point, and so we're lucky we have music to fall back on and good friends like you to do stuff like this, man. It keeps it fun and interesting.
Well, I'm glad, because you certainly helped me out today, and it was a lot of fun. So, Guthrie, thank you so much, and we'll see you next time on the 2020 quarantine edition of the Truetone Lounge. Thank you, Guthrie.
Thanks a bunch, man. See ya.
All right. Bye-bye.
All right.